In the French National Library in Paris, there is a stack of typed and hand-lettered pages that appeared on the shelves in the 1960s. No librarian bought them. No scholar donated them. They were planted, slipped into the collection so that researchers would find them and believe them. The pages describe a secret society almost 1,000 years old, guarding the living descendants of Jesus Christ. If that story sounds familiar, it is because the Da Vinci Code sold 80 million copies of it. But years before Dan Brown, the same story went into Chapter 5 of Fritz Springmeier's Bloodlines of the Illuminati, the chapter on the Freeman family. Today we read that chapter, and then we open a French police file from September of 1993, the file in which the man who invented the entire story sat before a judge under oath and admitted he made it all up. 27 claims. 3 tiers of sources. Let us begin. The fifth family is Freeman. Of the 13 bloodlines that rule the world from the shadows, this is the one hiding in plain sight. A surname so common that no one thinks to look at it. But follow the name to the top and it arrives at one man, Gaylord Freeman, chairman of the First National Bank of Chicago, and from 1963 to 1981, Grand Master of the Priory of Sion. Understand what the Priory is, and everything else follows. When the Crusaders took Jerusalem in 1099, an order was founded at the Abbey of Notre-Dame du Mont de Sion on the hill outside the city walls. The Order of Sion placed Godefroy de Bouillon on the throne of Jerusalem, the first Christian ruler of the Holy City. Out of the order grew the Knights Templar, its military arm, until 1188, when the two bodies split at the cutting of the elm at Gisors. Priory went underground, where it has remained for 8 centuries. Leonardo da Vinci served as its Grand Master. So did Isaac Newton, Victor Hugo, Claude Debussy, and from 1918 until his death in 1963, the French poet Jean Cocteau, the man Gaylord Freeman, succeeded. And what does this order guard? The most explosive secret in Western history. The bloodline of Jesus Christ. After the crucifixion, Mary Magdalene fled by sea to the south of France, carrying the children of Christ. Her line married into the kings of the Franks, the Merovingians, Clovis, Dagobert. The long-haired sorcerer kings of 5th, 6th, and 7th century France were the sons of God walking the earth, and the church knew it. The Carolingians who took their throne were usurpers, stealing a crown that belongs to the blood. And the Jewish princedom of Narbonne, under the exarch called Makir, was the southern way station of the line of David, which is why the Merovingians were, and remain, a Jewish royal house descended from King David himself. The blood never died, it waits. And the blood has a politics. Otto von Habsburg, last crown prince of Austria-Hungary, is a descendant of the Merovingians, and he heads Pan-Europa, the political instrument of the bloodline. Look at its emblem, a Christian cross laid over a golden sun. The European project itself, the coal and steel community, the common market, the European Union, is the Priory's design, the patient rebuilding of the bloodline's empire. Robert Schumann, celebrated as the father of Europe, wrote for Vaincre, the wartime magazine of Alpha Galatz, the order of a young French initiate named Pierre Plantard. The architects of Europe answer to the Priory. The bloodline crossed the ocean too. Consider Brigham Young. The symbol of Mormon Utah is the beehive, Deseret the honeybee. And where does the bee come from? From the tomb of Childeric, king of the Franks, father of Clovis, opened in 1653 and found filled with 300 bees of solid gold. The bee is the emblem of the Merovingian kings, and it flew to Utah because the blood went there. Mormonism itself is a high rite of Freemasonry. Brigham Young petitioned the Grand Lodges of England for a charter to establish Mormonism as its own Masonic rite, and when they refused, the saints built their rite in secret inside the temple. And Mormon men have sat at the levers of American money ever since. Reed Smoot, apostle of the church and senator from Utah, chaired the Senate Finance Committee and arranged a $10 million loan from the War Finance Corporation to the Mormon Church. Mariner Eccles became Secretary of the Treasury in 1934 and ran the Federal Reserve until 1951. Ezra Taft Benson took the Department of Agriculture under Eisenhower and ended as prophet and president of the church. Money, land, and the temple, one unbroken line. Now watch the Freeman name itself, because once seen, it cannot be unseen. Walter Freeman introduced the lobotomy to America in 1936. The destruction of the mind's front room, made surgical. Mind control, a generation early. Orville Freeman, governor of Minnesota, made a 32-year-old named Walter Mondale the state's attorney general, then ran the Department of Agriculture for Kennedy and Johnson, the food supply in family hands. Roger Freeman of the Hoover Institution whispered in the ears of two presidents. Robert Freeman of Goldman Sachs was one of the great insider traders of the 1980s. He pleaded guilty in August of 1990. Stephen Freeman ran legal affairs at the Anti-Defamation League, an organization founded by the B'nai B'rith Lodge in 1913 and funded, like so much else, by the Illuminati's drug money. A Freeman was tapped into Skull and Bones in 1869. A Freeman helped establish the Ordo Templi Orientis, the magical order of Aleister Crowley. The Unity School of Christianity conducts Luciferian initiations behind its sunny Kansas City face. General Earl Wheeler, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, was a 33rd-degree Mason and a Satanist, and his brother Leo rides in black limousines to the underground base at Dulce, New Mexico, where the arrangement with the visitors is administered. On the 13th of July, 1988, Mary Freeman of Marlborough watched a vast golden object hang in the sky over Silbury Hill, beside the Druid Stones of Avebury. The Freemans run a network of 1,000 cable channels, publishing authors on astrology, witchcraft, the liberation of women, the overthrow of the old order. Even the children are catered for. Don Freeman wrote picture books about witches, softening the young for the craft. Look at the pattern, count the coincidences. At some point, coincidence becomes design. The Freemen, the Freemasons, Freeman, the name is the confession. Part B, the check. This chapter is two buildings standing on two foundations. The first half, the Priory, the Merovingians, the bloodline of Jesus, stands on a set of documents in Paris. The second half, the Parade of Freemans, stands on the assumption that people who share a surname share a design. We are going to test both foundations. And we are going to save the Paris police file for the end, because it deserves to be read in full. Our measuring sticks: French court records, the medieval chronicles, university press histories, and the archives of the church in Utah. 5 verdicts are possible: confirmed, mixed, contradicted, unsupported, unfalsifiable. Every claim about the Priory of Sion runs through one man, so meet him properly. Pierre Plantard, born in Paris in 1920, the son of a butler and a cook. In occupied Paris, he founded a young men's order called Alpha Galatzes and published a small magazine called Vaincre, remember that name, it returns, whose politics sat comfortably with the Vichy regime. In 1953, a French court convicted him of breach of trust, abus de confiance, and he served 6 months in prison at Saint-Julien-en-Genevois, near the Swiss border. The 100 million francs in gold that Springmeier mentions supposedly moved for the government of France. That is, this conviction. The court heard the secret government mission story from Plantard himself and rejected it. It was a swindle, mixed, a real case, wearing a cape. 3 years later, in May of 1956, in the town of Annemasse, Plantard registered a small association under French law. He called it the Priory of Sion, named not for Mount Zion in Jerusalem, but for the Col de Mont-Sion, a hill up the road from his apartment. Its declared business was mutual aid among its handful of members. It published a few issues of a newsletter and faded within the year. That is the founding date of the Priory of Sion, 1956. Not 1099. Contradicted, and the Grand Masters fall with it. Jean Cocteau cannot have led for 1918, a society founded in 1956. The list that names him, with Leonardo, Newton, Hugo, Debussy, is a typescript Plantard's circle wrote. Contradicted. And Gaylord Freeman? The name enters the story late, through interviews Plantard gave in the 1980s, offering the retired Chicago banker as a recent Grand Master. No document, real or even forged, backs it. Gaylord Freeman was a real man who ran the First National Bank of Chicago and has no traceable connection to any of this, unsupported. Here is how the story got out of Annemasse. Between 1965 and 1967, Plantard and his friend Philippe de Cheriset, a comic actor with a taste for surrealist pranks, typed up genealogies, Grand Master lists, and secret histories, and deposited them in the French National Library under invented names. The dossier secrets. They stitched their fiction onto a real village mystery. A country priest at Rennes-le-Château who had died unexplainably rich, and a French author spun that into a treasure book. A British television writer named Henry Lincoln read the treasure book on holiday, followed the planted trail to the planted documents, and in 1982, Holy Blood, Holy Grail carried the story to the English-speaking world as suppressed history. The authors of that book were not hoaxers. They were the audience. Were the Merovingians real? Completely. Childeric, Clovis, Dagobert, Frankish kings who ruled Gaul from the mid-400s until 751. They were Salian Franks, a Germanic people from the Rhine Delta. Gregory of Tours wrote their history in the 6th century, close enough to smell the smoke, the wars, the murders, the baptisms. He records not one syllable about Jesus or Magdalene or a holy bloodline. The legend of Mary Magdalene sailing to Provence first appears in the Golden Legend, a 13th century collection of saints' tales, 600 years after the last Merovingian king was tonsured and packed off to a monastery. A dynastic secret is not improved by the fact that nobody mentioned it for 6 centuries. Real kings, confirmed. Children of Christ, contradicted. The Jewish princedom of Narbonne. In 1972, a Columbia University historian named Arthur Zuckerman argued that a Jewish prince called Makir held real territory in southern France under the Carolingians. The reviews in the historical journals took the book apart on its handling of sources. But grant Zuckerman every word, and he still describes the wrong dynasty in the wrong century. The Merovingians as a Jewish royal house of David contradicted. The Knights Templar, born from the Order of Sion. The Templars were founded around 1119 by Hugues de Payens and 8 companions, recognized at the Council of Troyes in 1129 under Bernard of Clairvaux. William of Tyre, the Templar rule. The papal bulls, no parent order of Sion appears in any of them. There was an abbey of Notre-Dame du Mont de Sion in Jerusalem. It housed ordinary canons, not hidden masters. And the cutting of the elm at Gisors? A real elm stood at Gisors. And in 1188, the kings of France and England really did quarrel beneath it, a diplomatic parley that ended badly, after which the tree was felled. An argument about a tree is not a schism of the secret chiefs. Contradicted. Godefroy de Bouillon, placed on the throne by the order, he was elected on the 22nd of July, 1099, by a council of Crusader lords meeting in open session in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre after Raymond of Toulouse turned the crown down. Godefroy refused the title of king and called himself Advocate of the Holy Sepulchre. Elected by committee, reluctantly, contradicted. Now the bee, the one physical object in the whole Merovingian case. In 1653, workmen in Tournai broke into the tomb of Childeric, father of Clovis, and found some 300 small golden bees, or cicadas. Scholars still argue. They are unique to that single burial. No other Merovingian king used them. They were never a dynastic emblem. Their one political career came 11 centuries later, when Napoleon, hunting for imperial symbols older than the Bourbon lily, had Childeric's bees embroidered onto his coronation robe. The Mormon beehive comes from somewhere else entirely. The Book of Mormon glosses the word Deseret as honeybee, and Brigham Young liked the hive as a sermon on industry, work, order, cooperation. Egyptians carved bees on temple walls. The Barberini popes put bronze bees all over St. Peter's. The bee is not a bloodline. It is the world's oldest logo for hard work. Contradicted. Mormonism as a high rite of Freemasonry deserves a straighter answer, because there is something real underneath. Joseph Smith was made a Mason at Nauvoo in March of 1842, and the temple endowment he introduced weeks later contains elements any Mason of the day would recognize. Historians inside and outside the church acknowledge the borrowing. But the specific charge here, Brigham Young petitioning the English Grand Lodges for a charter to make Mormonism a Masonic rite, appears in no lodge record, no church record, no history. It is a Springmeier original, mixed, real borrowing, invented charter. Read Smoot, senator from Utah for 30 years, chairman of Senate Finance from 1923, co-author of the Smoot-Hawley Tariff, all confirmed. The $10 million War Finance Corporation loan to the Mormon Church? It appears in no history of the corporation, and no history of the church. Mixed, real chairman, unsourced loan. Mariner Eccles, Secretary of the Treasury in 1934? No. Eccles ran the Federal Reserve, chairman from 1934 to 1948. The Treasury belonged to Henry Morgenthau. In a chapter about the hidden masters of finance, the book promotes the most famous Mormon in American financial history into the wrong job. Contradicted. Ezra Taft Benson, Secretary of Agriculture through both Eisenhower terms, 13th President of the Church from 1985 to 1994, confirmed and completely unremarkable. Now the Freemans themselves hold one fact through this section: none of these people are related to each other. Walter Jackson Freeman. On the 14th of September 1936, at George Washington University Hospital, Freeman and the surgeon James Watts performed the first prefrontal lobotomy in the United States on a Kansas housewife named Alice Hood Hammett. Freeman went on to perform thousands, eventually with an instrument modeled on an ice pick, driving between state hospitals in a station wagon reporters called the Lobotomobile. Confirmed, and the true history is dark enough without Satan. Calling it Illuminati mind control adds nothing but costume. Orville Freeman, governor of Minnesota, appointed 32-year-old Walter Mondale as Attorney General in May of 1960, then served 8 years as Secretary of Agriculture under Kennedy and Johnson. Confirmed. No relation to Walter. Roger Freeman, an Austrian-born economist who fled after the Nazis took Vienna, senior fellow at the Hoover Institution, advisor to Eisenhower, to Nixon, and to Governor Reagan in California. Confirmed. No relation to either. Robert Freeman, head of arbitrage at Goldman Sachs, arrested in 1987, pleaded guilty to one count of mail fraud on the 17th of August, 1989. The book misses the date by a year and served 4 months. Confirmed, with a corrected date, and with nothing occult anywhere in the court file. The Anti-Defamation League was founded in 1913 by the B'nai B'rith. Confirmed. Funded by Illuminati drug money? The League's funding is dues, donations, and grants, filed publicly with the tax authorities every year. The drug money line is an old anti-Semitic trope in a new costume, and it tells us more about the book than about the League. Unsupported. The leftovers go quickly. A Freeman in Skull and Bones in 1869, with one of the most common surnames in America, trivially probable and provably nothing. UNFALSIFIABLE. A Freeman founding the Ordo Templi Orientis, no roster, real or forged, contains one, unsupported. Luciferian initiations at the Unity School of Christianity, a New Thought church in Missouri. In 30 years, no one has produced a witness, a document, or a name. Unsupported. Otto von Habsburg. He really did lead the Pan-European Union. Vice President from 1957, International President from 1973 to 2004, and he sat 20 years in the European Parliament. Confirmed. On the roll. Descended from the Merovingians. After 12 centuries, descent from early medieval royalty is a fog that covers effectively every European lineage. It distinguishes no one. Genealogy that proves everything proves nothing. Unsupported. Robert Schumann and Vaincre. Remember Vaincre, Plantard's wartime magazine. Schumann was arrested by the Gestapo, escaped in 1942, and spent the rest of the war hiding with the resistance. He gave his name to the declaration that founded European coal and steel integration, and in 2021, Pope Francis declared him venerable, a step on the road to sainthood. His name in Plantard's orbit is a posthumous name drop onto a statesman who could no longer sue. Unsupported. And the European Union, as the Bloodlines project? Strip the invented order away, and what remains is exactly what it looks like. A coal and steel treaty signed by men who had watched 2 wars, trying to make a third one structurally impossible. There is no secret in the founding of Europe. There is paperwork. One more stop before Paris, New Mexico. The book sends General Earl Wheeler's brother to an underground alien base at Dulce in a black limousine. Earl Wheeler was real, chairman of the Joint Chiefs from 1964 to 1970. The base has an author. In 1979, an Albuquerque electronics manufacturer named Paul Benowitz began filming lights over the ranges near Kirtland Air Force Base and reported them to the Air Force. The Air Force Office of Special Investigations assigned an agent named Richard Doughty, who, instead of closing the case, fed Benowitz forged documents describing an underground base at Dulce, alien treaties, the works to bury whatever classified activity Benowitz was actually pointing his cameras at. Benowitz believed all of it, and it broke him. He ended in psychiatric care. Doughty later admitted the operation on camera. So mark the shape of this chapter. The Dulce base is not a leak. It is a manufactured story with a named, confessed author. So is the Priory of Sion. This chapter runs on 2 hoaxes, and in both cases, the man who built it eventually said so, out loud, on the record. Contradicted. As for Mary Freeman's golden object over Silbury Hill, one witness, one summer evening, in the great crop circle summer of 1988. Believe her or not, it connects to nothing and proves nothing. Now Paris, Plantard could not stay retired. In 1989, he relaunched the Priory with a revised history, the Jesus Bloodline quietly dropped, and a new list of Grand Masters. Onto that list, he wrote the name of a living man, Roger Patrice Pellat, a financier and a personal friend of the President of France. It was the mistake of his life. Pellat died in 1989 while under investigation for insider trading, and the corruption judge working the case, Thierry Jean-Pierre, came across the claim that the dead financier had been Grand Master of an ancient secret order. A French corruption judge does not leave a thread like that unpulled. In September of 1993, on the judge's order, police searched Pierre Plantard's home. They carried out cartons of forged genealogies and unpublished proclamations, including papers declaring Plantard the rightful king of France, heir of the Merovingian line he had assigned to others for 40 years. Under oath, Plantard admitted it. The priory, the lists, the lineage, the documents in the National Library, fabricated, all of it by him. The judge issued a formal warning and sent him home. He died in 2000, in obscurity. Sit with one date. The Sworn Confession, 1993. Springmeier's book, with the Priory carrying an entire chapter, 1995. The confession was 2 years old, and on the public record when the chapter went to press. He built it anyway. And the hoax outlived them both. In 2003, the Da Vinci Code turned the planted history into the best-selling thriller on Earth. 3 years later, 2 of the Holy Blood authors sued Dan Brown's publisher for taking the architecture of their book, and lost because the court held you cannot own as fiction what you sold to the world as fact. The men the hoax fooled first ended up in court, defending it as property. That is the full life cycle of the Priory of Sion: a prison record, a small-town filing, a stack of planted papers, a bestseller, a confession, and a lawsuit between the deceived. At no point, not for 1 day in 1,000 years, was it ever real. 27 claims. The board. The Freemans is one of 13 Illuminati bloodlines. UNFALSIFIABLE. The Priory of Sion, founded 1099. Contradicted, registered 1956. Jean Cocteau, Grand Master, 1918 to 1963. Contradicted. Gaylord Freeman, Grand Master, 1963 to 1981. Unsupported. Plantard's gold moved for the French government. Mixed. A real fraud conviction, wearing a cape. The Templars born from the Order of Sion, split at Gisors. Contradicted. Godefroy de Bouillon, installed by the Order. Contradicted. The Merovingians descended from Jesus. Contradicted. The Merovingians, a Jewish house of David through Narbonne. Contradicted. Otto von Habsburg led Pan-Europa. Confirmed. The Merovingian descent. Unsupported. Robert Schumann wrote for Vaincre. Unsupported. Brigham Young, Merovingian by the B. Contradicted. Mormonism, a chartered Masonic rite. Mixed. Real borrowing. Invented charter. Reed Smoot's $10 million church loan. Mixed. Mariner Eccles, Treasury Secretary. Contradicted. He ran the Fed. Ezra Taft Benson, Agriculture Secretary, then prophet. Confirmed. Walter Freeman, America's first lobotomy. Confirmed. Orville Freeman, Governor, Mondale Agriculture. Confirmed. Roger Freeman, Advisor to Presidents. Confirmed. The ADL founded 1913 by Benai Bereth. Confirmed. The ADL funded by drug money. Unsupported. Robert Freeman, Goldman insider trader. Confirmed. Date off by a year. A Freeman in Skull and Bones, 1869. UNFALSIFIABLE. A Freeman founded the OTO. Unsupported. Luciferian initiations at Unity School. Unsupported. Wheeler's brother and the Dulce base. Contradicted. A confessed disinformation campaign. Don Freeman's occult children's books. Contradicted. He wrote Corduroy, about a teddy bear. The tally: 7 confirmed, 3 mixed, 5 unsupported, 10 contradicted, 2 unfalsifiable. 10 contradictions. And every load-bearing claim in the chapter is among them. Here is what this chapter really is. The entire modern mythology of the bloodline of Jesus, the Priory, the Hidden Kings, Holy Blood, Holy Grail, the Da Vinci Code, rests on a small-town French filing from 1956, made by a man with a fraud conviction, who confirmed under oath, 2 years before Springmeier published, that he invented every word of it. The confession was on the record. The chapter was written anyway. That is not an error of research. That is a choice. And the Freeman half is the surname fallacy at full volume. A neurologist, a governor, an economist, a trader, a lawyer, a children's author. Real people, none of them related, sharing one of the commonest names in the English-speaking world. Run the same trick on Smith and the Illuminati gains Adam Smith, Joseph Smith, Patty Smith, and Maggie Smith, a 14th bloodline nobody has thought to fear. There is no bloodline. There is a story about a bloodline, and stories, unlike blood, really do pass from hand to hand, gathering heirs, refusing to die. The only dynasty in this chapter is the hoax itself. Next, the Kennedys. Joseph the bootlegger, the ambassador who bet on the wrong side of a world war, and the prenuptial agreement nobody could read.